the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights, Education and Training. This event is organized by the Danish Institute for Human Rights in cooperation with the permanent mission of Denmark to the UN in Geneva, and it's co-sponsored also by the Republic of Slovenia and the representation there to the UN in Geneva also. I would like to start by welcoming our two ambassadors and also our two representatives from OHCHR and UNESCO respectively, and also our interventions panelists from the National Human Rights Institutions who piloted the data and the framework from Ghana, Ethiopia, Nigeria and Georgia. Welcome to you also. And we have actually 150 people signed up for this event. Not everyone is here yet, but also a warm and sincere welcome to all of you who are sitting in the virtual space, in the virtual room, participating from all over the world. We have people from India, Sri Lanka, Canada, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Turkey, Malta, Finland. So people from all over the world, many more countries than that. So welcome to everyone. So let me just set the scene before we start here. This indicator framework has been piloted 3 times, and 1 time using this online tool that we have just launched and that we're launching officially today. You can find the tool on the event webpage if you have not already seen it there. It's developed in consultation with OHCHR, and we have gotten substantial input also from UNESCO on fine-tuning the index score calculations in the tool. At the Danish Institute for Human Rights, we see human rights education as something that we cannot afford to overlook. It's key for promoting a human rights culture universally, and it's key that both right holders and duty bearers have knowledge, skills, and the appropriate attitudes in order to really foster this universal culture for human rights. Another important point in setting the scene regarding this is that this group within UNESCO who is adopting the indicator and methodologies for measuring progress under Target 4 of the SDGs on quality education, they have now endorsed the use of the indicator framework and also the piloted data as a contribution to measure progress under 4.7. So that's a great achievement for human rights education. Regarding this event, it is recorded, and please mute your mics when you're not speaking. And also, if you want to have a better quality in terms of the digital quality, then you should also turn off your cameras if you're not speaking. We will open up for interactions using the Microsoft Teams function a little later in the program, and the chat will only be used for technical questions, and the raise hand function will not be used either. So let me just start by introducing our 2 ambassadors. We have Morten Jespersen, who is the Danish ambassador to the permanent mission of the UN in Geneva. Morten Jespersen, he has served there for 2 years, and he's also served as Undersecretary for Global Development and Cooperation in Danida, and also as an ambassador to Nepal in Kathmandu. Blanca is ambassador at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Slovenia, and have held key positions in Slovenia both for Council of Europe and NATO and OSCE, and she's also served in Australia as ambassador to various organizations on behalf of Slovenia. Blanca has been a key driver for putting human rights education as a top priority in Slovenian foreign policy, and she is the author of various materials on human rights education, including the publication Our Rights, which has also been really starting the vehicle around getting Slovenia to become the leader of the platform for human rights education friendly states in Geneva. Let me also just say that this tool has been possible to develop with support from the permanent mission of Denmark to the UN in Geneva. So welcome to both of you, and I will now pass the floor to Ambassador Morten Jespersen.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. And first of all, a warm welcome to all panelists and the many participants in our virtual event today on tracking and celebrating human rights education, organized, as you said, by the Institute for Human Rights and co-sponsored by Denmark and Slovenia. I'm pleased that both OHCHR and UNESCO are with us today and will be speaking, and with representatives also from the national human rights institutions of Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, and Georgia. We have the right capacities gathered for a fruitful discussion, which can, we all hope, better connect our work here in Geneva with efforts at the national level. This marks the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training. The quality and extent of human rights education at the national level is crucial for the future of human rights. Children and youth need to know their rights, to uphold them, respect others, and to build democratic and peaceful societies based on equality and rule of law. Learning about their rights is the first step towards exercising and demanding respect for their rights. And we are pleased that very pleased that to hear that UNESCO now has endorsed the rights with support. It's an important step toward better data on the status and progress on human rights education within the framework of the 2030 agenda. In closing, I would like to congratulate the Danish Institute for Human Rights on today's launch of the Human Rights Education Tool. And of course, I would also like to thank you for organizing this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I will now pass the floor to our other ambassador, Blanca.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear all participants, panelists, dear friends, I'm very honored to be here at this very important moment when we are making another very great step forward in the human rights education and monitoring of it, and on the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training. The development of a culture of human rights and ensuring a focus on human rights education at the national, regional, and international levels are of utmost importance for very many reasons. Namely, human rights education is essential for establishing and maintaining democratic, tolerant, and sustainable societies. They are vital to long-term peace, stability, and security. And to build healthy societies, quality education is key. Resilient and inclusive education systems for all generations that include human rights education and are fit for today's challenges and for the future are an objective that governments and the civil society should strive for. We remember that in 2005, the World Programme for Human Rights Education started, and now it's in its fourth phase, in the phase 2020 to 2024, focusing on the target group of youth with a special emphasis on education and training in equality, human rights and non-discrimination, inclusion and respect for diversity. Its aim is in building inclusive and peaceful societies and for aligning the fourth phase with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically for the 4.7 goal. 2 years ago, in 2019, the UN General Assembly decided to proclaim the International Day of Education as a reminder of education's fundamental role for peace and development. And of course, here we need to include the human rights educations. These decisions and documents constitute an important framework for the educations of many generations in our world. So human dignity and human rights must serve as foundations for all our actions in all our societies. Effective human rights education can help foster a culture of peace, tolerance, and understanding of diversity in societies, including their religious, ethnic, demographic, and cultural aspects and minorities. Human rights education has proven also to be a successful way to sensitize the society and also to prevent and combat discrimination and other forms of intolerance. So empowering the children and youth through the human rights education can consistently build the resilience of our societies. Here I must stress that schools are places that can offer positive life experiences, ensure awareness about the need to be active in defending and respecting human rights for all, including the vulnerable individuals and groups. It can foster self-reflection and action to promote human rights. But let's be realistic and turn to the current situation. The closure of schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the lives of 1.6 billion students worldwide. And we must remember that education is a human right, independent of any crisis, and must therefore be an important part of the response to the COVID pandemic. Despite numerous and tireless efforts of teachers, parents, and others who are making it possible for children and youth to learn, even in the time of the largest disruption of our education systems, research indicates that education inequalities have increased, and we need to address these inequalities and a variety of problems also through human rights education to provide stability and hope for a better future. As you have also already indicated, yes, I have personal experience with the project, Our Rights, but you made a little mistake saying that I served in Australia. No, it was in Austria, in Vienna. No problem. But anyway, also in Vienna, this project has been done. Anyway, I wanted to just say that since 2005, with this project based on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we have enabled 250,000 children in 26 countries in Europe, Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East to be educated, to be empowered by knowledge about these rights. And preparations are underway to implement it also in Japan. But what I wanted to stress is that the experience shows that different environments present both great opportunities and exhibit pressing needs in this regard. And the inclusion and participation of children in processes contributing to their empowerment can boost their healthy development and long-term engagement. So I would just like, before closing, say that I'm very happy that our Human Rights Ombudsman in Slovenia just received the status A according to Paris Principles 2 weeks ago, and its Human Rights Center, which is an internal organizational unit, has a specific regard in promoting human rights education, and they will be using your new tool for and in research what is going on in our own country, and the further action of the center will then be based on the results of this research. And they told me that they look very much forward to hearing about already the existing good practice from other countries that we will hear from the panelists. It is important to implement human rights education in all settings, wherever possible, and improve monitoring to address implementation gaps at the national level. This is why today's presentation of this new tool developed by the Danish Institute is so much needed and welcome. So I really congratulate you all and thank everyone involved for your initiative, for your work and contribution to promote human rights education at the global as well as national levels. And last but not least, I would like to use this opportunity to call upon all UN member states and all other stakeholders to increase their efforts to implement the World Programme on Human Rights Education on their national level. and promote the UN Declaration on Human Rights in Education and Training. With this action, every stakeholder would considerably contribute to the respect and promotion of universal human rights for all. So good luck today, good luck in the future, and thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Blanca, for these uplifting words regarding the progress on national implementation of human rights education, and also pointing to the fact that human rights education is actually for all target groups, not just for children.
Yes.
It's for everyone. It's for also duty bearers. And that's also why the World Program is in its entirety is important for us to look at. This tool is focusing on the children and on the teachers, because these are the ones that are going to build the society for next generation. So that's why we're starting here, but we have a lot of work ahead of us in terms of really ensuring good quality and also, I mean, both the right to education in terms of the current situation with the pandemic, but also good quality in terms of human rights education, and that it is actually taking place, that we just don't have it on paper in Geneva, in New York, but that we actually are able to transform that and to hold states accountable, ourselves accountable, and then have teachers implemented and children and youth enjoying human rights education as is their right. So thank you very much to both of you.
Keep going. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. It's good with so many friends internationally. We're so good that we are many on board on this. So I would like now to introduce our two keynote speakers. First, Elena Ippoliti from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. She is coordinating the training and methodology unit, and she's been with OHCHR for, I think, last time we spoke, 22 years or so. And also a warm and sincere welcome to Cecilia Barbieri, who's the Chief of Section at the Global Citizenship and Peace Education unit at UNESCO. She's been also with UNESCO for approximately 22 years, working also from Santiago de Chile and other places, and have great experience from both Latin America and Africa in particular. And both of you have experienced both working with human rights education at the more structural levels, with developing policies and global outreach and setting standards, but also really getting down in the ground and working with human rights education training programs and working as trainers and educators yourself. So welcome. We look very much forward to hear your addresses. Elena, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Cecilia. I would like, first of all, to thank the Danish and the Slovenian permanent missions to the United Nations, as well as the Danish Institute for Human Rights, for having invited us to participate in this event. And I would like, obviously, to greet all the participants from different parts of the world. So as you know, the OHCHR, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, coordinates the World Program for Human Rights Education, which is a UN framework for national action, proclaimed by all states at the United Nations General Assembly, and which is organized in consecutive phases. The World Program actually provides practical guidance in the implementation of commitments made by states in the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training, which has been mentioned already, is turning 10 years old at the end of this year. So the current fourth phase of the World Program, as Ambassador Jamnis just mentioned, is dedicated to human rights education for youth, including in the context of primary and also secondary education, which is the focus of this human rights education indicator framework we are discussing today. Last year, the office presented to the Human Rights Council the final evaluation report of the third phase of the World Program, involving a review of national reports which had been submitted to our office. Particularly with regard to the primary and secondary school systems, several states reported putting in place systemic human rights education strategies in line with the World Program guidance, which involve complementary courses of action, adoption of policies, training of education personnel, curriculum and textbook development or revision, the use of participatory and learner-centered methodologies, and the fostering of learning environments where human rights are learned and practiced. However, as this report also has signaled, we rely on uneven reporting practices from states and often anecdotal evidence in terms of capturing progress in the area of human rights education in primary and secondary schools, among other sectors. There is a need for a more solid methodology for the international community to be able to collect and share advancement and good practice with a view to inspire more and more effective action. By providing a series of common, objective, and data-based indicators, the indicator framework can certainly contribute to these national and global needs. So, as it was mentioned, it is important to stress that this tool not only assists implementation of the World Programme, but also implementation of Goal 4 on quality education, of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and particularly its target 4.7, both the human rights education component of Global Indicator 4.7.1, and specifically the thematic indicator 4.7.3, which is closely linked to the World Programme. Now, since early 2018, OHCHR has worked with the Danish Institute in the conceptualization and development of this indicator framework. We have provided methodological feedback on various versions of the text. We have supported the work of the Danish Institute and of other national human rights institutions in piloting the tool, such as a workshop in September 2018 on OHCHR premises. And we have actively participated in various initiatives like side events at the Human Rights Council to promote awareness of the work being undertaken. We will continue to engage in this work closely also with our UNESCO colleagues. And as it was already briefly mentioned, actually Cecilia at the beginning gave the good news, the recent endorsement by the relevant technical body, which is called the Technical Cooperation Group on SDG 4, of the use of this indicator framework, as well as their decision to include the thematic indicator 4.7.3 related to the World Programme in the monitoring framework for SDG 4, are very encouraging steps that reaffirm the role in human rights education in ensuring quality education. We look forward to collaborating with states and national human rights institutions to continue improving this tool in order to meet the requirements of the 2030 Agenda as well as of the World Programme. In conclusion, I would like to stress that, like for any other methodological guidance, the values of this human rights education indicator framework resides in the use that stakeholders make of it. We encourage states and national human rights institutions to take full advantage of the work which has been undertaken, to use this tool and to continue nurturing it with experience, so that it can effectively contribute to fulfill the mission of human rights education, which is to empower every individual to fully participate in building a just, peaceful, and equitable future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena, for this keynote. I will pass the floor now to Cecilia Barbieri.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, as well. And well, dear excellencies and dear colleagues and all the participants. Well, first of all, allow me also to join Elena in thanking really the permanent mission of Denmark and the Republic of Slovenia, as well as the Danish Institute for Human Rights for putting on this important event, and really congratulations to bring us all together today. So, well, in my intervention, actually, I would just like to add to some of the points made by my colleague Elena from the High Commissioner, who covered already very well and substantively the relevance of this human rights education tool for the monitoring and implementation of the World Programme, which has been reinforced, as Elena rightly mentioned, by the Technical Cooperation Group on the indicators for SDG 4, who, as we heard, endorse the use of this indicator framework, human rights education indicator framework, and really emphasize the need for a pilot data collection using the framework. This is the purpose of this meeting, and actually what the Danish Institute for Human Rights seeks to advance. And I really would like to take this opportunity to thank the Institute for allowing us, let's say, to contribute and to accompany also the development of this framework. Well, first, and I think many of you know, let me go back to our, let's say, core mandate of UNESCO. UNESCO was founded on the conviction that the defenses of peace must be constructed in the minds of people, and that education is indispensable for human dignity. So inequality, exclusion, denial of human rights and of democratic principles weaken, we know, these defenses. The period we lived through, the COVID-19 crisis, has exposed our interdependence and our fragility to an unforeseen degree. We have seen that it has hit the most vulnerable hardest, interrupting their education because of poverty, because of family circumstances or lack of access to technology, because of disability sometimes. Our Global Education Monitoring Report, that I believe many of you know, estimates that 40% of poorest countries fail to provide a specific support to disadvantaged learners during the height of this pandemic. A pandemic that has also unleashed a wave of disinformation, of conspiracy theories, of hate speech and xenophobia, and a pandemic that really has amplified on social media networks all these challenges. However, the crisis has also provided us with an opportunity. Crisis provides, let's say, us with opportunities, and an opportunity to reimagine our world, and in particular to reimagine our education, to build a more resilient education system and education systems that respect diversity and that are really welcoming for all. So for UNESCO, recovery means greater investment in education, but not just in any type of education. And you mentioned, some of you mentioned the target 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, that, as you know, calls for all learners to acquire knowledge and the skills needed to promote sustainable development through education for sustainable development, through human rights, through gender equality, through the promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, through global citizenship and appreciation of cultural diversity. So in short, if we are to truly and effectively build back better and build back resilient and recover in our new normal, we need to invest in inclusive, in education that is relevant, that is equitable, that is of high quality, and that promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So this means, of course, investing in human rights education. And UNESCO works in this area is guided by our Global Citizenship Education Program, which builds on our work on peace and human rights education, and that is grounded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in the 74 recommendation concerning education for international understanding, cooperation and peace, and education relating to human rights and fundamental freedom. And a very important point that I really would like to make is that for us, human rights education is really at the center of this work on global citizenship and must be at the center. So GCD, I would call it, aims really to instill in learners with the knowledge, the attitudes, the values and the behavior that support a responsible civic engagement, both at local and the global levels. And we consider actually this type of education an educational tool that can really empower learners to exercise their human rights and also to respect and to uphold the right of others, as well as to face and resolve global challenges and of course become proactive contributors to a more inclusive, peaceful, and just and sustainable world for all. So the piloting of the human rights education tool for monitoring this indicator 4.7.3, it is the extent to which the work program for human rights education is implemented nationally, we really think that arrives at a very crucial juncture. In light of the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training, and the 60 years since the adoption of the UNESCO Convention Against Discrimination in Education, both key instruments, as we know, which are recognized as a cornerstone of the Education 2030 agenda. And although as we enter the last 9 years of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have an opportunity and the moment to generate a major emphasis and focus on human rights education, on its relevance for our world today and its role in helping countries to build back resilience. And at UNESCO, much like our colleagues at the High Commissioner for Human Rights and at the Danish Institute, we believe that human rights education has really the power to transform lives and can be used as a tool to reset our world and to align it with the ambitious goal and targets of our common Agenda 2030. But we cannot go alone. Mm-hmm. We know actually that we need the countries to invest in monitoring and reporting on progress made towards target 4.7, and particularly on this indicator 4.7.3. And we know we need more research and data on the impact and relevance of human rights education. In our case, as far as UNESCO is concerned, we have this sort of overall responsibility for monitoring of the monitoring of the SDG 4, and there are some some data collection process ongoing, including the one on the 74 recommendation, mm-hmm. right? And so we think actually that all the efforts really contribute toward the gathering of more data, which will in turn allow us to showcase the relevant and impacts of this work. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, and congratulations again for this initiative that we hope will bring forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And thank you very much, Elena, for addressing these important current challenges also for all of us, and for human rights education also, and how human rights education can actually be part of some of the solution to the current pandemic crisis, and also regarding creating stability and peaceful societies for all. So thank you for lifting us up in the helicopter. Now we are going to be very concrete and very technical, and I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Sille Stiesen, who will give us a fly-in on the tool that you can find, of course, at the event webpage, and also to some of the data and findings. The floor is yours, Sille.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. First of all, let me greet everyone from all the different time zones and regions that we have together here in this virtual space. It's really a pleasure to have the attention of so many people and to be able to share with you and present the work we have done, the tool we are now launching. I work in the Human Rights and Sustainable Development of the Danish Institute for Human Rights, and we work in many ways at the interface between sustainable development and human rights, and to realize the human rights potential that we see in the 2030 agenda. So just a very brief presentation of my background. I will be demonstrating our newly launched tool, the SDG 4.7 Human Rights Education Monitoring Tool. And before I start, I want first of all to thank OHCHR for the cooperation we've had along the way. It was discussed already, I think, in 16, 17, in 2018, some of us met in January in Geneva and had our first discussions on this, and now we're here launching the tool. So thanks for that cooperation. I want also to thank the Permanent Mission of Denmark to the UN for the continuous support we've had from you along the way. Then one more thing before I start the actual presentation of the tool. We have participants among us who are eager to contribute with reflections and engage. Unfortunately, we have a very tight schedule. So we are applying an interactive online tool to invite you all to engage and to share your thoughts. In the chat, you will see a link to Forms, which is an online question sheet with a few simple questions where we ask you to put in your answers, your reflections, and we will use your input moving forward and touch upon them in the closing of this event today. So we hope you're with us on this electronic version of interaction in this virtual space. So next slide, please, Sophie. What you see now here is the landing page of our tool. The tool enables national human rights institutions and state parties to monitor implementation of human rights education. As such, the tool is relevant for assessing progress on the human rights education element of Global SDG Target 4.7, and at the same time, it's relevant for reporting under the World Programme for Human Rights Education, as well as to treaty bodies and the UPR on progress in national implementation of human rights education in relation to obligations enshrined in international conventions. The tool is available online. This is what the landing page looks like. And data collection with this tool is digital, it's user-friendly. Users will get guidance and conceptual clarification along the way while working with the tool. So we've made an effort to make it user-friendly and also maybe even a bit educational in terms of seeing what the actual obligations on human rights education are according to our international human rights conventions. Next slide on methodology, please. So the methodology for developing this tool and its scope is based on the two most comprehensive internationally agreed frameworks that we currently have on human rights education, namely the UN World Programme for Human Rights Education and also SDG 4.7 that contains important elements on human rights education. When we started developing the indicator framework that is in this tool, we started by looking at Global SDG Indicator 4.7.1 and its 4 dimensions. That was our point of departure. You see them on the left. And then at the same time, we looked at the World Programme for Human Rights Education and its 5 components. And as you will see, there's quite a bit of convergence there, but you will also notice that the learning environment is not mentioned in the 4.7.1 indicator. And we decided then in our indicator framework, which has now evolved into this tool, we would include the learning environment too. And that is why in SDG lingo, the data that we generate with this tool are relevant both to validate the human rights education aspect of data's global data collected under indicator 4.7.1, and they are also relevant for the new indicator 4.7.3, or the thematic indicator that has been recently adopted and where use of our tool has been acknowledged and accepted by the TCG, as Elena mentioned, and Cecilia Barbieri mentioned. Next slide, please, features. So if you're now wondering, how does this tool work? The simple question is that we have 2 elements in the tool. We have the questionnaire, the assessment tool, where the indicators are and you can respond, etc. And then we have a data storage and processing element of the tool. The SDG 4.7 Human Rights Education Monitoring Tool is able to store data. It's able to process the data and visualize the data in ways that makes it easy to gain a quick overview of the human rights education situation in a given country or in a selection of countries through graphics and charts. Next slide, please, on the 5 domains. So users of the assessment tool, the questionnaire, the data collection tool, they will see these 5 domains when they enter and start their own data connection. You will see that we have the policy domain with 7 indicators. We have curricula with 4 indicators, teacher education with 5 indicators, student assessment with 3 indicators, and finally learning environment with 4 indicators. Under each domain, we have mapped the corresponding legal obligations as per international human rights instruments. And we have also looked at the authoritative guidance and interpretation that has come over the years from treaty bodies. And based on that, we have identified a series of indicators to measure national progress against these standards. Next slide. What you see here is the screen as it looks when you are starting your data collection. Well, not exactly the start. Here we are into, I think, the student assessment domain. But the screen looks like this when you are setting out to use the tool to collect data on the human rights education situation in your own country. So what you see on the left in the blue box on the top is the indicator. Below that you see response options, and below that you see fields for providing references that underpin your response. We find that very important for the transparency and validity of the data, that whatever response is there is supported by a reference. In the center, you see guidance text, which explains what the indicator seeks to generate data on. And on the right, importantly, you see the associated human rights norm, the human rights norms and standards that the indicator reflects. Next slide. Once you have finalized your data collection, you have replied to all the questions, the data processing begins, and you can, through this data processing function, get a final report like what you see here on the screen. A final report that summarizes and visualizes the data for the given country. It provides an overall score based on an index calculation, which has been developed in close cooperation with our statistician colleagues, both our own colleagues here in DIHR, colleagues in OHCHR's statistics unit, and in UNESCO. So these index calculations sum up, and you end up with an overall score. You see here in the case of the Danish response that I'm showing you here, that it's above average. It could be better. We still have work to do. And you can also see on the right-hand side, you can see the domain-wise score. So we believe this final report format serves to summarize data in a way that can generate a quick overview and start reflections and discussions on where efforts are needed. I notice time and I'm speeding up, Cecilia. Next slide. This is to show you another of the data processing features that our tool has. The tool can show data from various countries simultaneously. It can make a visualized comparison of the situation, the human rights education situation in those countries. So what we see here is a comparison of data from Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Ecuador, Georgia, and Denmark. And you can see the different color graphs show scores on the different domains from each country. It is our experience that such data visualizations are real eye-openers. They show where we are on track, where more efforts are needed. As such, they are door openers for strategic conversations and also for peer exchange. One may seek inspiration from countries with high scores. State actors will gain a quick overview of where more efforts are needed. And again, I want to stress the transparency aspect, because what we see here is a visualization, a summary, you can say. So if you want to go back and see what's actually behind these graphs, all the responses entered in the system will come with a reference that points back to what the actual situation is, what this figure reflects. There may be comments also from the respondent. I want quickly to show you on the next slide another visualization that we can make, namely the Countrywise visualization of progress under each domain. And then finally, the next slide, please. I just want to sum up what our vision, our ambition was when we set out on this journey back in 2017-18. Along with colleagues in OHCHR, with whom we had a lot of fruitful discussions and interaction. We had in mind the wish to create a tool that would serve to identify gaps and challenges on human rights education at the national level. We wanted to create a basis for strategic advancement of human rights education. We wanted to provide a tool that could integrate or serve to integrate human rights and SDG reporting, including reporting under the World Programme for Human Rights Education, reporting to the relevant treaty bodies, reporting to the UPR, and reporting on achievements under SDG Target 4.7. Finally, we also wanted to nurture dialogue between actors involved in human rights education nationally, regionally, and globally. As Elena pointed out in her presentation, data has been missing. Systematic data collection has been missing, and we wanted to contribute to making it possible to get the data that can allow us to have the conversations we need to have. So with the launch of the tool, we sincerely hope that it will serve all of these purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Silje, for that very exquisite fly-in on the tool and the progress so far. Let me just jump right to our panel interventions. And I'm really delighted to welcome colleagues from NHRIs. We have Mitsane Abate-Dadese, who's a senior advisor from the Human Rights Commission in Ethiopia. Then we have Uche Okuwubi, who's assistant director in the research department at the National Human Rights Commission in Nigeria. And we have Nana Amua Siki, who's the director at the Public Education Department at the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice in Ghana. And then we have Medea Gurgashivali, who's head of Human Rights Education Department, Office of Public Defender of Georgia. So welcome to all four of you. So Mitsane, starting with you, you've been able to kick in some diplomatic doors in the Ministry for Education and really use the tool as a basis for building bridges and improving coordination and based really on data and evidence. So give us just a quick introduction to what you achieved with this tool, by using this tool.
Cecilia, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank the Danish Institute for Human Rights for allowing me to take part in this important event. I'm privileged to be part of this celebration of the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training. I'm really happy. So, as you rightly mentioned, by way of introduction, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission is one of the national human rights institutions that has made use of the human rights education monitoring online tools. And through the application of the online tool, we have drawn a lot of lessons which we can make use of in future. Just to give you a little bit background, Ethiopia as a country is a founding member of both the United Nations as well as the African Union. It's also a party to a number of international treaties which recognizes a broad range of human rights as well as the need for human rights education. But as you know, the fact that we have a number of rights in the international treaties as well as our constitution is not enough unless that is supported by strong institutions as well as creating a right-conscious society. So that is an area where the Commission has assessed a gap. And the Commission has so far, for a number of years since its establishment, it has very little involvement in human rights education in general, particularly human rights education in the formal sector, namely primary schools, secondary schools, as well as tertiary schools. So the Commission duly understands the challenges and the gap in this area, and consequently through the generous financial and technical support of the Danish Institute for Human Rights, it designed and implemented a project called Mobilizing Stakeholders for Integration of Human Rights Education in Primary and Secondary Schools. And that project has involved a number of activities which initially contains a research that assesses the level of integration of human rights education in primary and secondary schools. And then that research report was presented at a consultation workshop which draws all the relevant stakeholders, including the Ministry of Education, as you rightly mentioned, regional education bureaus, academic institutions, the Attorney General, and so on. And finally, we based on the comments we collected from the workshop, then we put forward our recommendation that we believe will enhance human rights education. And finally, we made use of the data collected to update the online tools. So this is just a background. So we made use of the online tools to do the study. So we track the status of implementation by the application.
So Mitsane, so you really use the tool to be able to kick in some doors.
Yes.
So to speak diplomatically with the Ministry for Education that you would not have been able to do otherwise, because now you had some data, you had some solid data as a basis for going into dialogue on gaps. And after that, you were really invited on board to give your input to curricular revision. Thank you very much for that. I will continue now with Uche, because in Nigeria, you've actually piloted the indicator framework twice before, and this is the third time that you're piloting it. And you've managed really on the basis to bring together stakeholders in the entire education sector to discuss your findings and also to look together onto the status of human rights education in Nigeria, not just for the other stakeholders that you usually work with. You usually to work with human rights education for police, but now you've actually also managed to look at human rights education for primary and lower secondary and teacher training. So just briefly, 2 minutes on your achievements from using this tool.
Yeah, hello everyone. Permit me to stand on already established protocol. My name is Uche Opobi. I am an assistant director with Human Rights Education and Promotion Department at the National Human Rights Commission in Nigeria. And it is indeed my pleasure to be here to speak on my experiences on what we have achieved so far in using the SDG 4.7 Human Rights Education Monitoring Tool in my country. Nigeria has been one of the sample countries, like Cecilia said, for the past 2018, we have been sampling the use of the tool, and it's been quite an experience for us. In my country, the tool has been able to reveal a couple of interesting trends for us. For instance, we were able to discover that stakeholders in education have not been coordinating their work around human rights education, with each other. The people just do what they think, and even without consulting the commission. And that human rights education has actually not been fully streamed in our nations. And also the tool was able to give us, it exposed us to clear linkages between the SDG and human rights education. And so based on our findings and the application of the tools, the Commission had been able to truly convene a meeting of the relevant stakeholders. We had a meeting with them and we were able to chart a way forward. We were able to encourage coordination and commitment from every one of them. And then we also hope that in the future, we are going to work to build a national action plan on human rights education. Also, we have been very interesting. We have been able to reach out to Office of the Senior Special Assistant, to the Special Assistant to the President on SDG. We have been able to reach out to the office, and then we have been able to, encourage and talk to them on reporting and communication on the human rights education through SDGs. And it has actually been interesting to work with them, and they have received it well. And we hope to follow it up for future engagements and then until it's actually reported. Thank you.
Congratulations on those achievements, and thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I will move to our next speaker, Nana Amua Siki from Ghana. Through this process of data collection, you've identified a major revision to the official curriculum that you would have not seen coming otherwise. And this process has really allowed you to provide quality input to the curricular process. Is that correct?
Exactly that. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And my name is Nana Amuasechi. I am the director of the Public Education Department of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice in Ghana. Mm-hmm. And I am pleased to join you all. We are very excited. We're very, very excited when we are invited to join in. And we are extremely proud to say that we have been able to test this tool, and that has given us an overview of the human rights education situation in our country. The tool has enabled us to, for the first time, have a comprehensive overview of the human rights education situation and to look at it in the integrated manner through the 5 domains of the tool. In our case, one of the most significant experiences was that we realized the activities other stakeholders were undertaking with regard to the human rights education in Ghana. For instance, while filling in the survey part of the tool, we learned that the national standard-based curriculum had already taken place. That is for the lower primary, and was ongoing for the senior high schools and the junior high school. So what the tool gave us was a situation assessment of the human rights education. And we got an entry point when we were able to participate in this very important, whilst the curriculum for the senior high schools was ongoing, we had an entry point to give in our views, and this was well received by the curriculum, the Council for Curriculum and Assessment in the country. And what we are currently doing after that is we have drafted a national action plan for policy consideration and also possible integration into the national standard-based curriculum for the country. So what we hope to do is to help in the improvement of the content and the importance placed on human rights education through our recommendations in the National Action Plan. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for this very clear presentation of your results so far. It is now also my pleasure to welcome Medea Gorgashvili, who will speak around your experience with working from the tool and how you have worked on the learning environment and actually been able to push for the establishment of a complaint mechanism. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this opportunity and very warm welcome on the greetings from Tbilisi. And it's an honor for me to be part of this discussion. Georgian Public Defender's Office mandate implies promotion of human rights through education. And we've been working on the informal education, but now more focus we are making on the formal sector of the education. After launching the tool, we managed to systematize our work more effectively and around so many issues. But I will focus on the learning environment and how we are concretely focusing on the concrete cases of discriminatory content in all levels of formal education, which is preschool, school, tertiary, and vocational. We have created a complaint mechanism, and through this mechanism, the children or parents or or teachers or anybody is able to submit complaints in case they identify the cases of xenophobic, homophobic, sexist, or content in the learning materials or in the teaching process, but also cases of religious and political indoctrination. And throughout 1 year, we have worked on a number of cases, and based on the findings, we provided recommendations to the Ministry of Education, and luckily they considered majority of our recommendations. So we find this tool very effective so far, and we are going to extend our promote this tool in many institutions in preschool, school, tertiary, and vocational level, so that many cases are revealed and we work on them. This is very briefly about our experience.
Thank you very much to you also for sharing your insights on how you've used the tool. I think it serves really as a good inspiration, all 4 presentations, for colleagues from other countries, from other NHRIs, on how to work with this. And while you have been presenting your experiences, then we have some inputs from the audience on forums. And one of the questions here that I would like to point is a question on whether this tool can be used across regions, and then in order to compare data. And yes, it can really be used as a leverage of showcasing the current status and also comparing yourself, your own country, to the status of human rights education in comparable countries, and thereby really lifting and seeing also human rights education analysis across. When that is said, really where this tool is going to prove itself is in the follow-up, as also pointed to by our keynote speakers. It's really how one thing is getting the policy, the curricula, the teacher training, student assessment, and learning environment structure in place, that's the first step, but we also need to see it evolve and develop at the ground. And this is really the next step. And that is also why it's really good that you have all 4 countries of you have really this follow-up process together with stakeholders, because this is where we want to see human rights education. It is among learners and educators, and it's out in the public space. So I think I will end this session by saying that you can have data without accountability, but you cannot have accountability without data. And this tool really provides that data that can hold ourselves and states, each other accountable, both at the national, at the regional, and the global level for the progress on human rights education. And we really hope with this tool that we can have human rights education coming from paper to practice, and also bringing it from just the minds and the policy level to the hearts and the living lives, because that is where human rights education is really worth the effort. So thank you very much for joining us here and celebrating the 10th anniversary on the UN Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training, and for celebrating the launching of our tool. And thank you to our keynote speakers, our panelists, our ambassadors, and to all of you joining out in the virtual space. Have a great day, a great evening, a great night, depending on from where you are joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.